After the moon landing conspiracy and ancient giants cover-up conspiracy, Daniel Haqiqatjou, the Muslim skeptic, brings to light a UN massive conspiracy to cover up the benefits of child marriages and destroy Islam with low birth rates.
There is no such thing as a coincidence.
Back to those, but a lot of his data, a lot of his slogans, the catchphrases come from the UN. And if you go to that feminist paper, Naval Noor paper, that says health consequences of child marriage in Africa.
Right.
At the beginning of her review, she says, since 1984, the United Nations and other international agencies have attempted to stop child marriage. This is how she begins the paper.
Right.
And she's basically saying, yeah, this one right here on the fourth or fifth paragraph.
And then she goes on, Abdullah, to explain why, because it's so harmful. See, they're trying to say this is all a conspiracy, that they're coming up with these findings because they want to stop child marriage. Why? Because it's harmful. This has been demonstrated time and time again. You guys have given no evidence that child marriage is actually beneficial in any way possible. In fact, you've had to concede on some points. So that's why they're trying to get rid of child marriage, because of how harmful it is. You guys actually have to show evidence that it's beneficial, and there's a massive conspiracy to cover up those benefits, which you can't do.
Paragraph. Right after it says United Nations efforts. Yes, there it is. So it says United Nations has had a stated goal of ending child marriage since 1948.
Because we were finding problems. There were reports coming back from doctors abroad of all these problems. And so it started to be studied more. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I shouldn't even have to point this out. They want to say there's some conspiracy since 1948 to prevent Muslim men from having teenagers as wives. Oh, they just want to ruin our fun. It's insane.
I met a man there, a scientist. He told me something. He told me.
So, Daniel, this molecular biologist, scientist. Sorry, guys, I have a fascination with Daniel Haqiqatjou. So, this scientist that made this statement about inspiring philosophy.
So this is his dishonesty or incompetence. Maybe he's just incompetent. He can't distinguish between a secondary source and a primary source. That could be the problem. Yeah, if you're scientifically illiterate, which is no problem. Like not everyone can study science. That's fine. Not everyone can have a science education. But if you're scientifically illiterate, then you won't even understand like what's the difference between these two graphs. Or if you're like Mike Jones, you'll see one sentence that confirms your bias, and then you put that in a chart in a debate and you run with it.
But an effective field description of a complicated dynamics coupling the environment and its fields. The solution we have sketched above entails the disappearance of the Haqiqatjou of particles, which are reduced to mere auxiliary constructs, useful for practical purposes, but in turn making reference to deeper constructs. For these philosophers, the problem now becomes, what are these constructs?
Guys, I follow inspiring philosophy 11 years. And before him, Johanan Ratz. This was the other Christian apologist that I think inspiring philosophy was inspired from. Guys, these two people are, you know how arrogant I am, and I say I can defeat anyone in this world, okay? When I see these people, I am afraid, okay? I say if I debate these people, they will murder me intellectually. Why? Because they are so scientifically literate. They will molest me intellectually, okay? We are talking, guys, about the most literate individuals when it comes to science in all the internet, something like that. And Daniel, the moon landing is a conspiracy guy, says about inspiring philosophy that he cannot understand science. Really. Let's see the level of the videos of inspiring philosophy.
Do not appear to be underlying objects or fundamental material substances. And the more we try to understand the basis of all reality, the more abstract things become. Walter Schmidt says, a field is anything that can assume a value in every part of space-time. And he says that fields are that which give rise to particles. Fields seem to be more mathematical than concrete. David John Baker demonstrated that many of the problems particle interpretations have also apply to field interpretation.
Daniel, now let's return to reality. Only I can stand in front of inspiring philosophy and debate. We used to debate, in fact, in comments in his videos. And one time we spoke because he wanted to make a video, and I had some information about whether for abiogenesis. Okay, anyway, Daniel, I can stand in front of inspiring philosophy and debate him, and probably I will lose. You have no chance in a tetrasecazillion. What happened to you now? You were lucky. That was in a subject with no real science. That's why you were able to even speak. That's why you were able to even speak and not be totally out of your water. But why did I make all this intro? To explain that no, you buffoon. Inspiring philosophy is not scientifically illiterate. In fact, the complete opposite, as always.
Yeah, so he's quoting things from these secondary sources, and he's not checking the source of this. He's not
Ironic.
checking that primary source. But when you
Yeah.
check the primary source, it's just like think tanks, it's like UNICEF, like just making broad claims based on feminist or liberal ideology. It's not
And
like
zero
medical,
data. Yeah.
zero data. It's not like a medical study. So this is his dishonesty or incompetence. Maybe he's just incompetent. He can't distinguish between a secondary source and a primary source. That could be the problem. Sorry, go ahead.
This paper, I checked every sentence. It never says girls under 18 are more likely to die from obstetric fistulas. It never makes any kind of claim that obstetric fistulas are more common in the...
That's false. All right. I'm going to have to pull the paper up. So here's the paper. Okay. Let's just read the abstract. Despite international agreement on national laws, marriage of girls under 18 of age is common worldwide and affects millions. Child marriage, okay, so under 18 is a human rights violation that prevents girls from obtaining education, enjoying optimal health, bonding with others their own age, maturing, and ultimately choosing their own life partners. Child marriage, that is under the age of 18, as just defined above, is driven by poverty and has many effects on girls' health. Increased risk for sexually transmitted diseases, cervical cancer, malaria, death during childbirth, and obstetric fistulas. Abdullah, it says it right in the abstract. Did you not read this paper thoroughly? It says it right in the abstract, dude. This isn't hard. Just read the paper, dude. I mean, there's a lot. Read this section, Children Delivering Children. It talks about this. I pulled stuff from this as well.
No problem. Like not everyone can study science. That's fine. Not everyone can have a science education. But if you're scientifically illiterate, then you won't even understand like what's the difference between these two graphs. Or if you're like Mike Jones, you'll see one sentence that confirms your bias, and then you cite that, you put that in a chart in a debate, and you run with it.
So, the kings of the Islamic Dawah, I saw that on Twitter. I'd marry off my 9-year-old daughter to a pious 50-year-old man. Wow. Farid responds, how is it child rape where there is parental consent? Sorry, are you mentally retarded? Sorry, but I don't know. Mohammed Hijab. The Quran sets no lower age limit for sex with girls. Good guidance. Necessary for humanity, otherwise we are lost. Okay. And then Daniel says, child sex is allowed even with a 4-year-old girl with precocious puberty. This was a tweet from Pak Kafir. He says, Muslims, there are atheists anyway. And then, Reed Vant, the apostate prophet, posted Imam Murrah the meme. He says, according to this graph, normal men are generally more attracted to a 14-year-old than the legal 18-year-old. So you believe Daniel. That's why you think that. Eh? But let's say, is that true? Let's see, is that true?
Versus age.
Here we go. Daniel's accused me of not doing proper research. Get ready for this.
So they showed the kind of silhouettes, body outlines of women at different stages of development, at different ages. And then they asked men, and they kind of did, like they hooked them up basically to different monitors to gauge the physiological reaction. That so even if they lied about it, they like your body doesn't lie basically, what you're attracted to. So they combined like the biological reading or the physiological readings with the actual question, like, okay, what do you find attractive? So they're showing these silhouettes of women at different stages of development without specifying an age. So there's no number. And then the men have to grade, okay, what do you find more or less attractive?
Wow, guys, he really did his research. He's telling you all the things the study said, didn't he? This is clearly what that study that's cited on the screen says, right? Right, Daniel? You read it, didn't you?
And you can see like starting from age 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 is the peak in terms of what these men who are surveyed in the study, sexual arousal and arousability to pedophilic stimuli in a community sample of normal men. So these are not like people who are suffering from other kinds of psychiatric issues. And this is what they find attractive. So, I mean, people, if you consciously ask them, you know, what do you find attractive? What age? Because of social stigma and because of different modern norms, they're not going to necessarily give you a honest or truthful answer. Or they might consciously not think that that's what they're attracted to. But if you show them a picture and you don't tell them what the age is, then they will find it attractive and their body will react to it. Yeah. So that's all considered pedophilia. That's all considered.
Okay, let's stop here. Daniel has claimed this study on the screen shows this graph that men are most attracted to 14, 15 age region. Daniel did not read this study. I don't even think Daniel looked at this study. Daniel found this graph online, and he assumed that is what the study actually showed. Let's start to go through this. So if you just search for the graph, here's what you find. This graph has been thrown around a lot. Here it is on Reddit. Okay. Here it is. Here you can see the graph is being used here. I've seen it on Twitter. Sometimes you can find the graph. Oh, that's a different graph. But sometimes you can find the graph without it. So here is the graph, as you guys can see, without the citation. Just the graph, no citation. And sometimes you can see it with the citation. It really depends. That graph is not in the paper, ladies and gentlemen. It's not. I think Daniel just saw this graph online, saw the citation, assumed that's what it said, and then ran with it. I read the paper. Daniel, public service announcement. If you cite a paper, expect me to read it. You better make sure you actually read them, because we both know you didn't read this actual paper here. You just found this graph on Reddit or Twitter, assumed it was accurate and went with it. Let's go and see what the paper actually says. It does not say what Daniel says. So here you can see 1995. Again, apparently that's out of date according to Daniel, because Michael Satlow's out of date, but apparently this one's not. Okay, they looked at 80 men from a community of volunteers, so it wasn't a randomized study. They hooked them up to certain parameters to, they hooked their male member parts up to an apparatus to measure arousal, basically, as they showed them different pictures, but they also played audio devices. A quick scroll through this shows, you can see the graph is not in the paper at all. Here's a graph from it, contrast between child-adult, different consensual, non-consensual situations, what would arouse them or not. You can see child is much lower than adult arousal. Then other graphs. The graph Daniel's citing is not in the paper, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you. It's not in there. Daniel did not read this paper. What they did is they hooked men up, and they basically tested their arousal for attraction to children or adult women. They didn't do these ages. They didn't go like 12, 13, 14, 15. They didn't do that. They just divided them into the two groups. Let me read from the actual paper to show you what they said. Okay, so they noted that, for example, self-reported female pedo interest had actually low non-statistical response right there. And with that, when it was self-reported, when we get into the actual implications, here's what they say. The slide and audio tape data combined suggest that most normal men are not sexually aroused by nude female children per se, but that some men who report no pedophilic activity are aroused when a female child is depicted as enjoying sexual activity with an adult male. Okay? Thus, arousal of pedophilic stimuli may motivate some, but not all. So those that were actually aroused by children were the minority, is what they say. They weren't the standard. Daniel, again, as I said, all he did was find this graph online, assume that the graph was right, because I found the graph too without looking. He assumed this was right, assumed this was the source, and said, "Oh yeah, this is what this paper shows."
And now for the icing in the cake, on the cake. I don't know. I'm Greek. Sorry, guys. Daniel made an article where he says, "Did giants ever exist? Why science wish they didn't?" Yeah, you got it right. Daniel believes in giants, that giants existed. And what is his evidence? A conspiracy.
This kind of
You heard it here
ban
folks.
on
It's
child-
a conspiracy.
So because of that, we've got a deliberate campaign by humanists, by atheists, by Darwinists to miseducate the public on this particular issue.
Sounds quite conspiratorial, Sabor. I mean,
It does.
So he figured out that, look now, listen to this, people, that US made a conspiracy to subjugate Indians. That is literally what he says. And they suppressed the evidence of ancient giants, implying that Adam, the prophet of Islam, the first man, was a giant. But anyway, so a US scientific institution made a conspiracy to hide this information so that they can subjugate the Indians, something like that. And of course, Darwinist. He also had Darwinist. And then in another relevant article, he says this.
Dr. Shadi El-Masri shared a Sari hadith on his page yesterday on the height of Adam. Some reacted with extreme skepticism. They demanded, where is the evidence? It's a funny question because, if you're Muslim, the evidence is the Sari hadith. That is the evidence. The only reason you would think that that is not evidence is if you are generally skeptical of all hadith. In which case you're just a confused baboon and have bigger things to worry about than the height of Adam. Or you take current scientific consensus as a sounder source of knowledge about the height of Adam than Sari hadith. First, we should note that we don't take current scientific consensus as relevant when it comes to many things described in hadith. Think of any of the signs of the Day of Judgment, example. And if you have a problem with hadith, then consider any of the events and things mentioned in the Quran. So, if current scientific consensus is not germane to any of these topics, why is it suddenly so all-determinative when it comes to the height of Adam? I am afraid people who take current scientific consensus so seriously are often deeply ignorant about the nature and the history of science. I have personal experience with this as a physics student at Harvard as well as a philosophy and history of science student there, and at Tufts. Some of my professors were Nobel Prize winners and others were on their way to winning it, and their ignorance about some of the basics of science history was astounding. They simply didn't think it was important to know the history of science.
What Daniel implies here is that Nobel Prize winner scientists should take the authority of the hadith over science. This is what this buffoon argues now. Look what this guy says. Okay, so now I will make a demonstration of what Daniel believes. This molecular biologist scientist.